So I started to realize that the patterns of fights were more than just spats, and that they were more intense, and like there was so much need for recovery after an intense verbal altercation that there would be like, he would be so offended and upset of our argument that he would need 3 days to not talk to me because he was so mad at me. And I had done such an grievance thing that I would try and move on and try and remember, oh, don't let the sun go down on your anger, like lift it up to the Lord and try and talk. But it would be so offensive to him that he would be like, you're coming at me and you're yelling at me. And I'm like, I'm not yelling. I'm talking loudly, but there's a difference between yelling and talking loudly. And I'm like talking loudly now. And so when I'm saying my opinion or like, gosh, this is happening, he would say like, you're yelling at me. And I'm like, I'm not yelling at you. And that it was in cycles. And now looking back, I'm knowing this word called cycle of violence, where it's a pattern and it may be a different conversation, but it's the same thing. And you can almost put it down to clockwork. You're gonna freak out on me for something. I don't know what it is, but it's gonna be something. And I used to always think, oh gosh, work is hard, and so he's stressed out. Oh, the homeowner hasn't paid the bill, and so like there's money that's needing to be gotten. But really those were all excuses for the need to behave and to act in violence, rather than it actually being a true stressor. And that it was just excuses to need to drink a minimum of 14 beers a day, and an excuse to need to calm down and need to have his own personal chill time to decompress alone, right? Because he needed to smoke marijuana. Or the pill usage for him was need. It was so intense that he would need to be consumed by it. Getting home late, which was considered to be late, like at 8:15 from gymnastics, which every other child in the world does, or you get home from Awana at 8:15, and that was a big deal. Like, he wanted our children in bed and their heads on the pillow at 7:30, and I'm like, well, other kids are out this late. Like, why is it such a big deal that like we're in a physical yelling altercation loud enough that our children are being kept awake, and we cannot get to bed fast enough? That like when we get home, I'm telling the girls, like, hurry up, do not play around. Like, you take your 3 bites of food, you brush your teeth, and you get your pajamas on, and we're in bed, because we do not want dad to yell. We do not want dad to get upset, right? Because we know that if we play around, that he's gonna be upset. And that it's just like, this is very passive aggressive, where you're walking on eggshells, but you tend to justify it and make and fix the problem, which holy cow, come to find out I'm like codependent. That is straight up codependency. And I have to fix the problem in order for it to be a safe haven. And I didn't know that that was not normal. Like, that's just not normal. And that was the life that I lived for 20 years. And it begins to wear you down to the point where when he gets upset and is frustrated with you and yelling at you, and then he is like, you're fat and you're lazy, all you do is sit on the couch and you don't do anything, and you live in a fantasy world. Like, you can't bite the hand that feeds you. Get a job. Every fight would lead to that. It was like the broken record of like those 7 things get said to me, and that's just not normal. Like, there's a way to be able to discuss and work through problems that are healthy, where you can say, this is how I feel when you behave this way, and I don't like this. I feel like this is how you should be handling it. Or so many other ways other than I am the problem, and then when I have to try and fix it. After him telling me that I'm the problem, then I need to go to him the next day and say, I'm sorry that I upset you. And then he's like, well, it's okay, I'll forgive you this time, but I'm probably gonna need a day to like chill out. So then we're at day 2 of not talking. And then day 3 is kind of uncomfortable. And then day 4, we're like back to normal. Things are just normal. And then we're good for like 10 days. And then boom, I've done something wrong, something grievous, like my food for dinner is not good enough. And then it's like, I don't want to eat it, so don't touch my food. I'm gonna make my own salad. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. It used to be that we would dish up dinner together and we would eat together, and got to the point where he's like, don't dish up my food, don't make my salad for me, just have it all out. And then it used to be that like we would go downstairs and eat together and sit and watch something. And it got to the point where I was like, I was not allowed to go downstairs. He didn't invite me, right? And if I did go down, he would say like, why the hell are you down here? What are you doing? I'm here to watch football with you, or I'm watching basketball with you. And then I'd ask questions and he's like, you ask the stupidest questions ever. Well, why are you asking that? Like, everybody knows that. And I'm like, okay, I'll just be quiet. And then it got to the point where it was like, I'd come down and he'd say like, what are you doing down here? And I'm like, okay. And then I started asking permission if I could come downstairs in my own home and say, would it be okay if I come down and sit with you and watch a little basketball? And he's like, yeah, I guess, you know. And then to the point where I started to realize that isn't loving and that isn't nurturing. So if you're watching and you're wondering, am I really loved? I just want to feel loved. And am I good enough? If you're feeling like you're not good enough and you just are not hitting the mark, that is not in alignment with God, Jesus, husband, wife. And it doesn't matter how obedient you are to the Lord and respecting and honoring your husband. If your husband is out of alignment, it doesn't matter how much respect you have. He's not going to love you and respect you and honor you and protect you the way that God has intended. At one point, the Lord will either bring him into submission or he will call you out. And in my case, he called me out, and I call it the Exodus. The last cycle of violence for my girls and I was Christmas Eve. And he came in and it was just a rage. He was irritable and nothing new, but he had been outside after a beautiful day of four-wheeling, side-by-siding in the canyon in Moab, and looking at stuff, and drove back. And the girls and I came inside and we're prepping for Christmas because it was Christmas Eve, and listening to Christmas music, and had a Christmas cartoon on. And it's 8 o'clock at night, and we got back at 4, and my husband had been outside drinking and smoking. And I just kept looking. I'm just like, gosh, it's been like 5 hours. So he comes in, and he had been wrapping some presents in the garage of the Airbnb, and he wanted to know if I had any batteries for some RC cars that he had gotten our girls for Christmas. And I said, gosh, no, I don't, but that's really unfortunate that it didn't say on the box that you should have batteries. Like, that's not cool. And somehow that got turned around to I was saying that he is an incompetent person and that couldn't know whether the cars needed batteries or not, and that he was somehow in the wrong for not knowing that they needed batteries. And I was like, whoa. For some reason, for the first time in 20 years, I saw that it got flipped on me and how I had been living. That flip of me just stating something, there was nothing wrong with what I said, but it got flipped to I was accusing him of being an incompetent person, which is not even anything that went through my brain. And then I had ruined Christmas because Nativity is a bigger deal to me than Santa. And the girls know that Santa is not real, but it is a super fun tradition that we partake in. And that the Easter Bunny is not real, but it is a super fun tradition that we partake in. But that Easter is all about the cross and the grave being empty. And that is still super fun to go around and find the hidden eggs. And that I just like ruined his life. and child rearing for him, that all of those fun things were not allowed to be anymore, and that it was always my way or the highway, and that he has no say and it's all me dictating. And then here I am in this conversation saying, I'm sorry, I'm not festive enough for you. Like, I'm very sorry. How can I help you? Like, how can I fix this? And turned into, then there's nothing that could be done. I then went to put the girls to bed because I knew I needed to separate myself from the conversation, and I didn't know what else to do. And they had kind of already stirred that way to being in bed, and they had their own bedrooms in this Airbnb. And so I went and kissed one goodnight and then kissed the other goodnight. And while I was in kissing the second one goodnight, he called me from the other room over the Christmas music, and I could hear it clearly. And so I came out and I'm like, I'm a what? Excuse me? Like, was that even necessary? And then I said, you're in out of control and you need to stop and you need to get out. I don't deserve this. I didn't do anything wrong. And I will not be married to a drunk anymore. And he got upset at me and came from across the room and grabbed me by the nape of my neck. And I had socks on my feet, and in the kitchen area, my feet slid across the floor as he pushed me into the master bedroom, which was across the apartment Airbnb, and got in there, and I was fumbling with my phone and I was trying to record. I'm like, I gotta record this. Like, this is different. Like, every other time I tried to record it, I think I should be recording his conversation. He should hear what he says to me after, right? Like, in his sanity moment. And I never do, because I never have my phone on me, but I had my phone on me, so I'm like, I'm recording this. And I got like so flustered and emotional and intense, like I couldn't hardly function my phone. And so he grabbed it out of my hands. He's like, what are you gonna do? You gonna record this? And I was like, yeah, yeah, I am. He grabbed and took my phone and threw it across the room. And so when that happened, I left the master and went back to the kitchen dining room area, and he just came right back after me and took a kid's plastic cup and threw it across the kitchen. And it hit the kitchen window, and I was going like, oh my God, he's gonna break the window, he's gonna break the window. That's the last thing we need, right? In an Airbnb to break the window on Christmas Eve. And it didn't, praise the Lord, break the window, but it broke the cup. And then it was like he snapped. And he went back outside, and I went in to one of my girls and took her into the other girl's room, and I shut the door, and one of my girls was crying, and she said, I said, oh, what's going on? Or why are you crying? And she said, I saw Daddy grab you by the hair and drag you in the other room, and I didn't know what was gonna happen. And I said, it's gonna be okay. We're all in here together and we're all safe. Like, it's gonna be okay. And we're just gonna go sleep, and we're gonna wake up and it'll be just fine. I met with a girlfriend. Her husband unexpectedly passed away, and I took them dinner. And when I walked through the threshold of their door, I just knew that I was grieving the same thing. Like, the Lord is like, you're grieving, you have the same loss. And I'm like, that is ridiculous. My husband has not just passed away. And when I went and hugged her just to say I love you, I didn't have any words, so I wasn't gonna say anything to her. That's the stupidest thing to say, something when you have no words. But when I embraced her and hugged her, she said, it's gonna be okay. Beauty from ashes. And that just rang and resonated with me like I had never heard it before, like it was the first time I'd ever heard it. And it penetrated me to my soul. The word, it is alive and living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword. When you hear something, sometimes it like resonates with you and you may not understand why at the time, but then the Lord used it later. And after our family vacation where we went as a family and we came back divided, and I knew that this cycle of violence, I had to not let it complete. I had to leave in the middle of the cycle rather than let it get to the apology and the it's gonna be okay stage, because the Lord said, this is enough, no more. It's been happening the whole time. It's been happening the whole time. And in fact, it's not gonna stop, it's only gonna get worse. And that just didn't make sense to me. Why or how the Lord could say that, because it seems so backwards, right? But you have to remember that the Lord, his heart is to protect. So he called us out. I knew when we got home that it had to be different. And so I called a girlfriend and said, we're coming over. And while we were there, I called the police department and spoke with the domestic violence advocate there and was like, oh my word, this is so overwhelming. So much to do. Like, it's so scary and overwhelming. And when I called a girlfriend while I was at my girlfriend's house, we made a phone call to another girlfriend because the Lord inspired the conversation and the need to call. And that friend said, hey, I was a part of something a year ago where they helped this mom, this wife, get out of a similar situation. Maybe she's still around. Maybe she's not hiding, and maybe she would be able to help you know what to do. So that connection got made. And then Beauty from Ashes called. And there it was, the connection from before with my girlfriend who suddenly lost her husband, who said Beauty from Ashes to me. And then there was Beauty from Ashes saying, this is the answer, we can help you. We'll help you get out from this cycle of violence. And then the next day, while it was planned to help direct and facilitate the Exodus, I call it the Exodus. The Exodus day started off by me leaving my door open when I left and not knowing if I was ever gonna come back, actually, and going to a car shop. And I was just driving there thinking like, I can't even believe this is real. You hear stories about this, and here I am, I'm driving to get my car checked to make sure that there are no tracking devices on it. How is this me? How is this me? And sitting and just reeling, going, there's no way this is real. But knowing that this is where I was at and this is what needed to happen. And knowing that while I was getting my car checked, that there was a whole team of people packing up my house and the items that I had on a list. Because of God's great love, and because of God's provision, we were able to get the items that were needed, and then some that I didn't even know that I needed. I said, get the girls stuffed animals, this one and that one, and they took all the bedding off the pillows and the 3 blankets on each bed, and I was freaking out. And they got our homework totes. I only wanted the homework curriculum that was in the tote. Those girls, they took the totes, and I was freaking out. And then I said, oh, I want these 2 books on the shelf. They took the whole shelf. And I was freaking out. I was freaking out because I wanted it to not be noticeable when he came home. I didn't want it to be visually noticeable. I wanted it to be low impact. And I was scared. I was scared that he was gonna come after us and that he would be so upset that he would find us and stop us. I was petrified. But I already knew when I crossed that threshold, from coming back, from getting my car checked, to meeting up with all those people that had great love for me and my girls and our safety and our best in God's provision, that the Lord said, there's no turning back. This is where you don't turn back. And that was hard. That was hard. But I knew it was the right thing to do. And in like an hour and a half's time, the whole checklist was packed up, and I had already started on the process, which I had no idea was needed, of a protective order, and the reeling of going like, this is why people don't leave, because there's so much that needs to be done that it's overwhelming. It is too much for one person to bear. It takes a team. It takes people that you knew that are going to support you and love you, and it takes people that you didn't know that have been through it that say, I'm going to help you. Here's my hand. And it takes people that have experience, and they help you until you can take a step on your own. And sometimes it takes a minute to be able to take a step on your own. Sometimes you have to be in hiding for a week until you can catch your breath. And sometimes you don't have to know what to do next, because somebody's going to be holding your hand, walking you through it, because it's too much to bear on your own. And you just have to take it one step at a time, 1 minute at a time, one breath at a time. Because if you take all of it and go, these are all the things that have to happen when you leave and get out of an abusive relationship, that is way too much. It is. It is way too much. That's why we stay, because we know what to expect. And even though it's awful and it's horrible and we deserve more, we deserve better, and we deserve to be loved, and we deserve to be cherished, and we deserve to be protected, we know what to expect. We know the words that are coming, and we know how long it's gonna take. We know how to smooth it over. And blazing the trail with a bushwhacker in the unknown is very scary, and it's overwhelming and intimidating, and it keeps us there. It paralyzes us. And then we become like little frogs in a pot. And then you realize, I'm being boiled, and I don't want to boil anymore. I don't want to get cooked. And so you get out, and it's scary and overwhelming, but it can be done. You just have to have a team. You have to have a support group, and you have to have somebody help you through it. And that's what they did. They helped me with a protective order, which I didn't even know I needed. And they helped me in safe housing, which I didn't even know that I needed. And they helped me know that I needed to then get an attorney, which I didn't know that I was gonna need. I just knew I couldn't be there anymore. And I didn't know how I was gonna do it, but I knew I couldn't do that anymore. So God's provision for us, for Beauty for Ashes, has been a lifesaver, because cycles of violence only increase in frequency and increase in intensity. They get worse and worse, and that's what happens. Starts with your dinner's not good enough, and then it becomes you're not a good enough person, and then not good enough person gets pushed out of the way, and then gets pushed up against the wall and is like, you're not a good enough person, you're lazy, get out of my face. And then that turns into, I'm gonna hit you. And then that I'm gonna hit you turns into, I'm gonna grab you by your hair and drag you in the other room so I can be you where nobody else can see. The Lord said no more. My girls and I had been praying for a year about getting a dog, and it just wasn't happening, and I kept saying, girls, we're gonna get a dog. You never know, somebody might just even give us a dog. Looks like somebody just needs to give us a dog, because my husband does not want a dog. So if somebody gives us a dog, he just really can't say no. And I've been praying for this dog and praying for this dog, and it needed to be, we have some allergies that would make it difficult for us to have a dog. So my checklist was kind of high up there and pricey, and I'm like, Lord, we need a therapy dog, literally, and they cost a lot of money, so you're just gonna really have to take care of this. And I came across this ad for puppies, but it didn't say how much these poodle puppies were. And I had been looking at the pound, and they just cannot verify or say for sure what the breed of the dog is. And you still have to pay for this unverified dog. And the only ones that are reasonable in price are old and worn out. And I was like, I did not really want an old and worn out dog for a therapy dog. And my girls need a puppy, and they deserve that blessing of needled sharp teeth. And so I call this guy, and he's like, yes, I have some poodle puppies, and offered the girl puppy. I was like, okay, but he had a boy puppy too. And I asked my girls, and they were fully unequally yoked. One was hard up a girl, and the other one was hard up a boy. And I was like, well, I'm telling you right now, we are not getting 2 dogs. I cannot do 2 dogs. I can do 1 dog. So I prayed on it and was like, well, can I contact you tomorrow? And he's like, absolutely. So I just kind of had this inspiration in my morning prayer time that we should have a boy. So I called him the next morning in the parking lot of the church and said, so here I am, same girl, interested in your poodle puppies and wondering if they're still available. And he says, yes. Would you like the boy? And I was like, I don't know. Can I call you back in 5 minutes? I'd have to ask my girls. So I hung up and I called the girls over and said, if you had a dog, would you like a girl dog or a boy dog? And they both unanimously at the same time said, we want a boy dog. And I was like, we're getting a dog at 3 p.m. And they're like, what? Are you kidding me? This is so fantastic. And then they're like, wait, are you serious? And I was like, yes, I am. And so we go home, clean up the house, and go to pick up this dog. And he is so stinking cute, just a little fluff ball. And he's black, and just eyes and nose and hair all black. And so as we're leaving, and the girls are holding him in the back seat, and I'm praying, Lord, you have already named this dog. You made this dog. You created him. What is his name? We need to name him, Lord. Please enlighten us on what his name is. And said amen. We get home, which is like 5 minutes, and the girls are like, we want to name him Ash. And I was like, what? Surely there's another name. Like, what about the name Black in Hebrew or Greek? Because it actually sounds really cool. And what about Cole? What about, and they're like, no. And I'm like, well, we don't even have to name him today. I mean, like, we could sleep on it. So then the girls say, no, his name is Ashes, and we're gonna call him Ash. And I was like, really? And they said, Mom, he's not only your dog, you do not get to be the only one to name him. They had no idea that our exodus was facilitated by Beauty from Ashes. And they had no idea. My friend said, Beauty from Ashes. So I said, Ash will do. Ash will do. And so we have a black poodle, and his name is Ashes, and we call him Ash. And he is our Beauty from Ashes. And we prayed for him a year before our exodus. So even though I did not recognize that we would be in a different space and a different location and a different circumstance than I knew and recognized and saw and could comprehend, the Lord knew. And we were praying about it before we even knew it, because that's how God is. He knows what we need before we do.